Hello and welcome back to the Fairbanks Year-Round Podcast. Today we are joined, well first I have to say I am the host, Blake Schreckgeist from the Summit Realty Group, and we are joined by Garret Hartley from the Revolution BJJ, which I know you most, and yes. I know you're a contractor, but now I don't know the name of your contracting business. I feel
it's
bad.
Repairing Alaska LLC.
Okay, so I should have asked that beforehand.
No worries.
Got going here. But I'm excited. We're going to have kind of two topics today. We wanted to talk about Jiu Jitsu. I love it, and I don't get to talk about it enough, and we'll do that at the end for people that want to tune out and don't care about that. But sure. Something a little bit more topical to, and it's Fairbanks topical too as well, but I did want to talk about construction, conditions of homes in Fairbanks in particular, and just kind of talk about a lot of details that people moving to the area may not know about.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, but before we get to that,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for being here. Yeah. How did you come to Fairbanks?
Actually, it's kind of a funny story. I grew up in a very religious home back in Montana, and kind of a farm lifestyle, and ended up going through Bible school and getting my pilot's license. I had actually agreed on a 1-year contract to come to Fairbanks, Alaska, to fly out into the bush for a missionary organization.
Okay.
And that ended up not being the greatest choice. So I ended up fulfilling the best of my obligations as the best I could, and just didn't have the money to leave. So I stayed in Fairbanks and started a business, and that was 2004 actually. So I've been here for 20 years now, and just never really worked up the gumption to leave, I guess.
So becoming a pilot, I didn't know this about you. That's not just something you do overnight.
No.
That's a pretty big investment of time, money.
Yep.
How come, do you do that still? Do you like as a hobby or anything, or is it just not something you do anymore?
It's not something that I do anymore. It's something that I do have aspirations to continue. But I think my focus shifted, for various reasons, personal and otherwise. It's an expensive hobby. So it's not something I wanted to continue to do while I was trying to grow a business and things like that. But
yeah, one of these days
I'll get back into it.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to have my broker, Joe, who is an avid hobbyist pilot, and we're going to talk about all the expenses and stuff, because he's like, it's, you think boats are expensive, you know? It's like the next level from there.
Yeah, pretty much.
And a lot of people don't know. So the bush, of course, is areas typically only gotten by air or by boat. They don't have a road system to them, or at least most of the year, we'll say, don't have a road system. Maybe you could dog mush out to them, I suppose, as well. But a lot of these small flights are very, very common in Alaska. I'm sure they are in other states, but this is probably got to be like the capital of the country as far as like these small flights going to these little, gravel and landing strips and things like that. So,
you'd be real surprised how many small cabins and, small settlements that aren't even on a map exist out there. People living off the land the way I get thousands of years.
Sorry. I get a ton of calls on land, and it's always like super cheap land, but it's always like fly-in access only, and people are unbelievably shocked by that. And they're like, why is this so cheap? It's like, well, you have to fly to get there. I'm like, well, is there any other? It's like, no, you don't get it. You're flying out to this little lake that's in the middle of nowhere, and that's that's part of the draw of it. And by the way, if anybody wants one, I've got a piece by a Great Lake, not one of the Great Lakes, but a pretty lake, I should say. So got stuck here. You enjoying Fairbanks? Are you? Everyone's always in the thought of moving at any time.
It's always in the back of your mind. It's one of those toxic relationships, where you're like, do I stay or do I go? There's a lot of good about Fairbanks that I really love, and I can just never really see myself severing that tie completely. Would I like to avoid the winters? Yeah, just as much as anybody else. But ultimately, I think, the Golden Heart City gets its name from, natural wealth, but truly, I think the people are the golden heart of Alaska.
100%. That's what I've said this a million times, but the community is what really gets people, I'll say, quote unquote, stuck here, where maybe they have complaints about, there's not this, or the winters are cold. Of course, that's probably the number one.
Yeah.
But then you are surrounded by what I think to be an excellent community of hopefully like-minded people, me personally, where you're like, gosh, you know, especially me living other places, it's like, it's not that common. It's not like you go anywhere and all the people are the same. It's very different. So
it really is.
If you find that spot where you really like, hey, this makes a lot of sense for me here, it's hard to get away from. But
I also like to talk to people about, you know, opportunity. I believe that Alaska is still a land of opportunity. And there aren't very many locations like that left in the United States. You know, for people who are interested in moving to the area, I kind of say that even those of us who are, you know, quote unquote experts in our field in certain areas, we're a big fish in a very little pond, right? So the opportunities that we have here, and I'm saying that totally out of pocket. I don't feel that way about myself. I feel that when you come to this community with a set of skills, you have opportunities here just strictly because, you know, per capita, not many people have those skills available. So when you come to Fairbanks, or at least this has been my experience coming into Alaska, I've been given opportunities I would not have otherwise had elsewhere in the country, simply because I would have been up against, you know, 300-400 people in the application pool, as opposed to one or two other people.
Or none
at all.
Or they're begging you to come
here in this area, right? So with that being said, I have found myself having a lot of really tremendous opportunities that I'm sure we'll talk about later when we get into the jiu-jitsu conversation. Things that I never otherwise would have had I been anywhere else in the country. So, you know, that's another positive to living here in the area.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. So I'm from Alaska, but I lived down in Arkansas, and we're a very small school. Like the graduating class was probably like 70 kids or something, not big at all. And there was like our quarterback football star, right? And he goes to college, and he was telling me later, he said it was so eye-opening. They sit in the locker room for the first time, and they're at college now, and the coach says, all right, all of you have these state competition rings. You have these championships you've won. He said, just put them all in the trash. Everybody's got them here. Like, it was this whole, it's what you're saying. So they were the big fish in this tiny pond, and now they're going to this big pond, and they're just another somebody. It's like, oh yeah, you were the king, but everyone here was the king of their school. Like, that's how they got to this arena. And then I'm sure when you go to like the NFL, it's even another step further, where again, it's like, you remember being the best at everything and everything came to you naturally or whatever it was. But so did everybody else here. You know, we've all been kind of selected. So
just get to start over.
Yeah, which is exciting. Clean, and there's certain people like you. A lot of people talk about the Michael Jordan documentary. I don't know if you watched that, but yeah, really just. I don't want to say he was insane. That's the wrong word to use, but an intense person. But you're also like, you wouldn't be Michael Jordan if you weren't like an intense competitive guy, right?
True.
Yeah. So some people do enjoy that, but I have found in myself, and maybe this is just like lowering the bar, where I like to be the big fish in the little pond. Like, it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, he's like, hey, you don't have to be, you know, I don't need to go to New York and sell real estate or whatever it may be to feel fulfilled. Some people do, I'm sure. Yeah. But no, it's super important. And a lot of people need to realize that, because not only will sometimes not just how you feel, but how you feel like affects how you go forward. So if you feel like a loser, it's like maybe your life choices just keep taking a downward turn, because like, oh, I'm not the best. Where why don't you go somewhere where you are the best, you know, and you have, like you're saying, all these opportunities, and you're not competing all the time. So yeah.
Your unconscious mind believes the things your conscious mind.
So you came up here. You get stuck. What's from that point to becoming a contractor? Was that like a smooth transition for you, or did you kind of tumble your way towards it?
I would say it was a little bit of both. You know, growing up in Montana, again, grew up in a very religious setting. We lived off grid. Had a small farm. There were 6 of us kids, and Dad was a sole proprietor, and so he taught us all, you know, various aspects of the trade. All of us boys. There was 3 of us boys. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and number 4 out of 6. So I'm like right smack dab mediocre in the middle. And we, you know, from very young age, working with our hands, you know, producing for our own livelihood and building. That kind of carried over. By the time I moved here, I was 21 years old. And And it was kind of a natural transition for me. I'd already had, 6 years of hands-on full-time construction experience. So in many aspects, I was already a journeyman. So getting a job here was easy, I'm willing to work and came with I think a special set of skills, and got a job, employed, ended up deciding I'd rather work for myself, and it's like any other business. You kind of go through that J curve where you're setting up your business and your reputation before you really take off. It took a couple of years to really gain that reputation, and I feel like it's been a positive ever since. There's been very, very few slow periods for me as I've kind of evolved from doing flooring and basic finish carpentry into becoming a general contractor the way I am now.
Awesome. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. So you had these, you weren't coming in completely blind though. Just like your lifestyle kind of gave you a lot of the base skills you needed.
Correct.
Yeah. That's important to see.
Mechanics and building and, agriculture, things like that. There was already a real solid foundation of information and now, skill.
Yeah. I want to talk about houses too, but you keep bringing up interesting points. There was, I don't know what the timeline is. I don't want to say exactly when, but we'll say, so my grandpa, back in he's born in the 30s. And he pretty much, you did whatever you could in those times. So he was starving all the time. He always told me he was like 5'8". He's like, I'd be as tall as you if I'd been given enough food as a kid, and which is probably true. But yeah, you just did whatever you could. You worked really hard. Like that was just the normal. Everyone did that. And then his son, he's very much now, made a little money or whatever. Times have changed. And he says, you need to be working with your mind, not your hands, and I think we had a huge swing towards that, a huge push for college. Like, I think this all kind of convened together where it's like, all right, we all want these white collar jobs now where we're sitting at a desk, and it left this huge void. And I know like Mike Rowe talks about it all the time, but for the people working with their hands and these tradespeople or whatever it is, and I think there's still that void, but we're having a really heavy swing back. I'm hoping, I don't know how fast it's going, where people are realizing, working with your hands is not a bad thing, because it almost got demonized there for a bit. I don't know if you would agree, where it's kind of like you're dumb as a rock if you're doing construction or whatever. It's like, no, it's super gratifying and satisfying, like framing a house or whatever in particular, because that goes so fast. You're like, this is wonderful, house almost done. But so we're seeing that swing back, and the money's there too, especially like you're saying in Alaska, the opportunity. Come up here even with zero skills and become an apprentice for wherever, in a union or just under a contract or whatever it may be. And you've got like such a huge runway of, income potential for yourself, as opposed to being like the thousands, whatever programmer or something that comes out of college, again, it's that big fish, little pond idea.
And up to their eyeballs in debt.
Yes.
I think it was President Obama actually addressed this issue back during his presidency about the limited supply of labor in the trades, and how he was pushing money into trade schools and things like that, because we have such a limited population of tradesmen now, and for exactly the reasons you've described, the demonization of physical labor as if it were kind of below us or something along those lines. And I think we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in education in the trades, but agreed, it's still a wide open field, and I think that it's a lucrative field. It's not the easiest field. There's stress and liability and, financial hardship, just as same as any other industry you get into. But I think for me, probably one of the most satisfying aspects of this trade, of the construction industry anyway, is that people come to me with a problem and I get to help. And if it's an existing home and they come to me and they're saying there's all these problems, maybe it's an engineer who's pointing out the issues for a home sale or purchase, we get to help them, and we always get to leave the home better than it was before. So, or building, it's not always a home. Sometimes, there's construction, commercial buildings that we're working on as well, things like that. But nonetheless, the satisfying portion of it being that we're always leaving things better than it was. We're able to maintain and make things better, which increases the value of the structure, increases the net worth of the owners as well. So there's that satisfaction to me. But I think ultimately, you know, if it was an industry that didn't make us money, we wouldn't be in it, obviously. But
right.
you know, I think the more visceral part of it is that.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And there's nothing better feeling than you're on the other side of it. But being you're good. Being a homeowner, being a real estate agent as well, where you have this issue that maybe you've even tried to fix, and it's the unbelievable frustration that comes along with home projects that you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
it's a lot. Well, and then somebody else coming in and just like, I don't know. What it feels like is when your dad would come in and do something for you. That's what it's very similar to. It's like, I just can't do this. Right. You know, Garrett, come on, can you? And you're like, oh yeah, it's easy. And then it's, you know, it's done kind of deal. So there's, a huge satisfaction on the other side, the receiving end, where you're like, oh my God, this thing was almost insurmountable in my head. And I was able to just basically farm it out, which is
sure.
A powerful thing of today's times where you don't have to do everything on your own.
But, you know, it's like anything else. If I were to try and sell my own home, can I do it? Probably. Is it going to take me forever? And am I going to get the best outcome? No, I'm not going to get the best outcome. It's going to take me forever. I'm going to have to find my way through it. Yeah. Can I do it? Yeah, it'll be satisfactory. But the same thing applies when you call me to work in your home, build you a home, remodel your home, you know, whatever it might be. Can you do it? Probably. Can you do it satisfactorily, or is it going to be done properly? And in addition to that, you know, time is money. So I could do it myself and it will take me 10 times as long. I could make the same amount of money that I pay you within that same time period doing what I'm good at. So that time is money as part of that.
Yeah. It's a balance
decision as well.
Yeah. Right. So I'm very much about becoming more self-sufficient, which is finding those areas for yourself. So I always bring up cutting wood. I like burning wood. I like cutting wood. It is very clear to me that the time I spend doing that is really not the best time spent, like financial wise. Sure. If I sold another house, I could pay for the wood or pay for the fuel to heat the house, probably better. But and everyone's got to find it for themselves. Like, I enjoy doing that. And just like we're talking about the physical, like the gratitude you get, like chopping wood, I like doing it by hand. I don't like having the hydraulic splitter as much. And it's just like the physicality of it is enjoyable. Sure. So, you know, again, financially, but I have my reasons for doing it. But then I did go kind of almost too heavy that way. And you kind of bounce back and forth. I was young. I hired everything out. I was like, I didn't have enough money for this. I was not as valuable in my work field then. And then I went the other way. So I think people do find that balance of where, hey, you can do a lot. And some people want to be 100% self-sufficient, which is totally fine. And that's good for them. But most people, you're going to find this hybrid model that works where you're like, hey, I want to do these things. I want to have a semblance of control over where my life goes. But also understand we're not back in the days. You're not alone. Same as we talked about with the community. This is what the community is for. Like having these skills to do things together where, you're going to help me with a renovation. I'm going to sell your house. You know, we all have these things that we're not technically bartering anymore because we have this medium of money now, but it's the same concept where it's, you know, just flowing through the community. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So agreed. Let's get on to houses. Sure. So a lot of people, we'll make a story about one buyer, let's say, we'll call him Joe. And he calls me and he wants to buy a house up here. And he's decided, as many people do, they want to buy something cheap. They want to fix it up. They want to do it themselves. They want to hire whatever it is. They want to do some kind of renovation and do what's called a forced equity gain. So equity gain comes through time of the market rising and it rising all ships. And the forced value add or the forced equity gain would be you fixing and improving the house. And we should do a whole podcast on that because there's things you can do to improve the house to you that you're not actually getting your money back on. Correct. We don't do a lot of these here, but pools are always the big thing we talk about in the South. They cost a ton of money, and the pool installers are like, hey, you're going to get all this money back when you go to sell your house. And it's you are not. Just anybody who's not listening from Alaska, a pool almost certainly is not going to get you back what it costs you. But anyway, so they call Blake, the realtor here, and they want to buy and I'm going to try to limit my talking, but it's going to be a bit of back and forth. They want to buy a fixer-upper house, and they know nothing yet. So let's first talk about a lot of the conditional issues that people will run into in Fairbanks, North Pole, this area in particular, that they may not see other places. And the thing I'm thinking about mostly is permafrost and its effect on our house. Yeah. So what does that do to, again, a lot of people are surprised to hear this, but what is permafrost doing to our houses in a lot of cases?
So in my experience and what I see more often than not when somebody's building in permafrost, permafrost needs to stay frozen in order to be stable. It's permanently frozen. So the biggest mistake that I see people making in permafrost is that they put skirting on their house in order to try to, conceal the piers underneath their house, things like that. We don't pour concrete slabs on top of permafrost. Essentially what that does, to those who aren't familiar with how permafrost works, is it basically is putting a blanket on top of ice, which warms up the ice and melts it, causes the house to sink. There's a home that's a few miles from here over in the Farmers Loop area that is sits about 5 feet lower than it did when they built it. And that's because they built it on a monolithic slab on top of permafrost.
And this is, to be clear, this is way more common than, this is not like a one-off, like you saying something like that, like foundations moving and things like that. It's very, very common here. So
correct.
Every area has someone, that foundation went bad, it cracked or whatever. Right. I think most people are surprised. And again, we're going to be talking about a lower price range. We're going to say really $275 and below, which is kind of crazy that's the number. You're generally going to be dealing with some kind of movement in your foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. And and we didn't explain permafrost, just you basically did. But our ground freezes, obviously, here as everywhere, but it's so cold that it stays frozen throughout the whole year. Yeah. And of course, as water freezes, it expands, thaws, it contracts, and it moves.
Yes.
And it has a ton of force, obviously. And a lot of people aren't thinking when you have so much ground. Like literally I had a client call me, their garage was built separate from their house. And he's like, man, I just heard this. I thought someone was breaking into my house, like prying my door open, and it was pulling apart in the middle of the night. Cause he was just hearing like basically a cracking, tearing, and he's just, anyways, so that was kind of lucky.
The permafrost tearing the home apart.
Yes. It was two different foundations that didn't match up, appropriately, basically. Sure, so there was some work to be done. But
and I've seen examples of that often. I'm in multiple different houses every week, just looking, giving estimates, things like that. So I see these problems a lot. Essentially, when we have that heaving or that expansion and contraction that takes place with the permafrost, and it causes buckling in the house and things like that. Not every soil type in this area is permafrost, but the ones that are in permafrost that seem to last the longest are homes that are built on adjustable pilings. So very similar to what you see in the Deep South, where they're building on piers. To get away
from the water more.
It's for a totally different reason. But we build our houses very similar to that. With adjustable pilings, so that we can keep them level as the ground is expanding, contracting, and heaving, and it's just a part of the way we live. So that's the most common way that I see of handling the permafrost situation. So when people come up to Alaska, and this has been my experience, and they're looking to buy a house, and they're looking in that 300,000 and below, and they're like, this house is built on piers, and they want 300,000. Well. But we've kind of perfected the way of building a solid house in that situation. So
I want to give a caveat.
Go ahead.
Yes, contractors have. There are so many houses built on, like what we say, post on pad, piers, that it's not standardized. There's a variety of good ways to do it. So I shouldn't say it should only be one way, because there is a variety of good ways to do it. However, you have a lot of houses that maybe started as some dog mushers, nothing against dog mushers, but whatever, a small cabin thing, and they just popped up whatever they could, and they've got no pad. So it's just wood, maybe treated, maybe not. Maybe it's railroad ties crisscrossed on each other in a more like a wood crib foundation kind of situation. So you do run into, and that's the point I wanted to make, is adjusting a foundation to be level when you're buying a house is not the end of the world. It's like an ongoing maintenance item you have to be aware of, and adjusting even if you pay to have it done. not the most expensive thing in the world. Maybe as cheap as $500-$600, maybe once every other year. But then you have these foundations that are really not foundations. They have a house sitting on some blocks of wood, like literally, like blocks of wood. We're talking 2x4s, like cutoffs, like
I've
not even
seen it so many times.
Oh my gosh, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then that's when you get into the more expensive side where you're like, hey, now we have to probably jack this house up. And again, there's a variety of ways to do it and put in the correct foundation. So that does get expensive. And I've seen, on little cabins, 20, 30, 40 grand. Oh man, we saw some nightmare ones. Speaking of permafrost, in an area that didn't seem to have any permafrost, but they dug out the side of the hill and it just changed the ground ecology or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Did the hillside start slipping?
It was, I don't think it was slipping too much. And this is off in North Pole.
Okay.
But anyways, Lackloy Hill area, kind of the base there. And they had like I want to say like a $90,000 foundation fix. And this was like a monolithic slab kind of house. So they had to come back through, and then I saw it back on the market, and it was needing it again. They had another quote for like $120,000. It's like, will it stop? Maybe.
We don't know. And that's the hard thing about the soil here. There are so many different types of soil. We've got permafrost not only down low, but also in the hills where we've got subterranean glaciers that we deal with. And we also build in riverbeds, so it could be sand if it's anywhere near, the Tanana or a glacier-fed river. It could be gravel if it's built anywhere near the Chena or any of these rivers coming out of the hills. So I have personally never lived in a place where there's such a wide variety of soil. And what that means is that it's really important if you're buying a house that has foundational issues or you're building a house is to have a contractor who's very experienced in all of these different types of soils. So my company, one of the main bread and butter things that my company does is that we do major structural repair, and that includes foundations. So when it comes to all of the standard forms of foundational repair, we've pretty much nothing we haven't seen in this area. And every soil type is different. Therefore, it means that every foundational type is going to be different. And sometimes people just get the wrong rubrics and they haven't quite lined it all up, and we have to go in and try and correct that or at least stabilize it. So it's not a perfect science, but we work with a lot of really good engineers here in the area. So I'm sure we could name a few, and I don't want to give favorites out there, create favoritism, but we have a lot of good engineers who are very well versed in building and repairing foundations on our soil types. And I work very closely with them so that we're giving our customers the greatest chance of success.
Well, this is one thing, going back to the big fish in Little Pond, I think we may be the biggest fish anywhere, because the amount of foundation work that our contractors see has to be more than, unless you're looking at the same latitude across, maybe some Nordic countries see some similar, but if we're just talking like the lower 48, it's like, I think you guys could go down and teach a lot of classes on, which it's not as necessary down there. But something I did want to point out is the permafrost. You hear a bunch of stuff about permafrost. It's kind of, I don't want to say the boogeyman, but a lot of people have different ideas of what permafrost is, what it isn't. I'm not like the best at this, but I did hear, I thought it was pretty funny. And this was actually an engineer, Tim Henry. People are always talking about, if there's big birch trees, if you're on the south facing side of a hill, all these seeing things they look for, you probably are good. You're not got permafrost. And his thing, because he sees so many houses, he's like, the only for sure, he says, those are good things. The only for sure way to know you don't have permafrost is palm trees. If you have palm trees on your property, that's how you're going to know. And I thought, hey, that's,
he's got a point.
That's how I'm going to take my liability away when people ask me. And I'm like, well, are there palm trees out there? Well, we're not sure, but you can get some soil tests if you want. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I used to own a piece of property out in the Steel Creek area. Big palm trees. Now you got my. I'm dreaming now. Birch trees. So we big birch trees all over the property. Pine on the property. All of those telltale signs of no permafrost. However, the house sat on a subterranean glacier, and that glacier was about 10 feet subsurface.
Oh, really? That's pretty close.
It was very close. So. There was still movement in the soil, and there was still high water tables.
You're moving down the property.
Our property line was drifting. But I have seen a shift where those subterranean glaciers are moving because our winters aren't as cold as they used to be. So there are other, scenarios to think about that is more than just permafrost. And it's, to kind of give, I'm not going to say a rebuttal to what Tim is saying, but to add to what he's saying, you're right. He's 100% right. Just because there aren't the telltale signs of permafrost does not mean that there isn't still ice under the surface.
Yeah, but there's hope. We have figured these things out a lot.
Yep.
Again, I would say the biggest issue I run into seeing all these houses is people not doing it correctly from the get-go. Like that's always where they don't know. Maybe they've not tested the soil. And again, not to just people building cabins that don't know what they're doing. And just like, I think they would even tell you, they obviously didn't think putting things on 2x4s was like the appropriate method, but it's, again, it's a harsh climate. It's expensive to live here. I never hold anything against anybody, but that's usually the big issues we're running into. So Mr. Joe has called and he wants to buy, he's looking under the $300,000 mark. He's wanting to do these renovations. He hears foundation issues and he tells me, and he says, I don't want to deal with foundation issues. And it's like, okay, so everyone knows, if you're wanting to do a big fixer-upper and you're under 300, you're almost always going to be dealing with that, and just for all the reasons we just spoke about.
Agreed.
So come to terms with that. Not every time. These are generalities. There may be a really rough house with a great slab and a great foundation, but generally you're going to see, and it's so funny because people, I feel like a broken record because I'll send them reports and different things on house they ask me about, and they're like, oh my God, does every single house have foundation issues? I was like, in your price range, you can almost guarantee it. Yeah, which is, again, I know $300,000 is a lot of money. I'm not saying that these are poor people or anything like that, but it's like the reality of our area. So now you're looking, okay, I want to buy a house that has all these fixes. And I know we just talked about foundation, but of course it could be a lot of other things. It can be ugly. It can have all these structural, electrical issues with similar causes. Again, it could just be some guy who built a house the best he knew how to do. And you get in there and you're like, the electrical system is a mess. The plumbing was poorly done, whatever. Like all those same things can come up. And this will be a little bit on me, and I'm going to push it back to you. We'll talk about the lending side now.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, if you have cash, tune out now. You just buy the thing cash and there's no problem. And if you got the budget for that and stuff, that's fine. However, most people want loans. Most people think what they're going to do is the bank is going to give them a loan for any house they want, and they're going to live in the house and they're going to out of pocket slowly fix things. How many times have I heard this? I don't know. And you've heard similar, it sounds like.
Yes, I have.
So they're going to do this. This is not going to happen, folks. The only time you can do that is with what I call ugly homes, and that is cosmetic fixes. So if you've got cosmetic fixes, let me back up. A bank, and there's all different types of loan types. We're not going to go into all of them, but every loan type has minimum conditions for what they want the house to be. And the reason they do this is because they are investing in this property as well as you. They're the ones giving the bulk of the money, and people forget that. And they're like, this is my house. It's like, technically, it's mostly the bank's house.
Yeah,
so that's why they do appraisals and all these different things to make sure that not only the value is there, but the condition is there. So I cannot give you a list because, again, every loan type's different, but generally they want a very livable, safe, sound house. They don't want a bunch of mold. You can't be missing a toilet fixture. You can't have, even in most cases, you can't have like big holes in the sheetrock, which, it just could be safety reasons. So if you find a house that meets the minimum livability, but it has shag carpet, those are the things you can do. Like that's, if you want to push towards those. And again, you're going to be looking $275, $250, maybe $225 and better for those kind of lendable houses. So if you want to do it that way, just keep that in mind. You want to do a big, heavy renovation. We want to do these big foundation issues beyond an adjustment. All these things, you're now looking at what we call renovation loans. They're basically construction loans. There are some differences. And again, what people think renovation loans are is the bank says, yeah, this house is $100,000. You've told me that you need $100,000 to do the fixes. Here you go. Here's a bucket of $100,000 extra to do these repairs. Again, not how this works. They'll do, and I don't want to get too nitty gritty, but you will find the house and just keep things round. We're going to say $100,000. The house is worth $100,000. They'll do an appraisal on it. And they'll say, hey, in its current condition, yes, it's worth $100,000. When you fix it, give us a list of all the repairs you're going to do. We're going to do what's called a paper appraisal. And when you fix it, we believe it's going to be worth, we'll say 200,000. And then they'll give you a loan amount of a percentage of that. And everyone's different. A lot of times it's 80% of value. So if the thing's going to be worth 200,000, they're going to give you 160,000 total. And 100 of that's going to go to buy the property. The other $60,000 is going to go towards repairs. One more caveat, and I know I'm talking a lot, sorry, but we got to line all this out, is that 60,000 is not a bucket of money for you. You get draws on it to do the things. How do you decide how much repairs are worth? You don't tell the bank, contractors tell the bank. You have to have licensed contractors give the bids to say what the work is going to be. Because, and again, if we look back, what the bank is doing is they're investing in you and taking an even bigger risk than a conventional house because they need this to be done. And even with hired contractors, it's not the easiest thing to do. So they're not, again, going to just give you the money unless you're a contractor, in which case you're not listening to this because you already know how this works. But if you're just some Joe Schmo, that is what you'll run into to where you need to be able to spend this money. Now, can you do some of the repairs? There are ways around it. We won't go into that. But this is where Garrett's going to come in. So in the loan process, we got to pull a bunch of bids together. And I guess let's kind of break down the bid process. What do you do when you're giving a bid, like in general? It seems simple, but there may be some details in this.
So first things first, when somebody approaches me in this scenario, first thing I always ask for is an engineer's report.
Yes.
So my first go-to is, all right, do you have an engineer? If you do not, I highly recommend getting one first. Have them go and look at the house that you're interested in. That will tell you a lot about whether or not it's worth investing into that asset or not. Second of all, once they give me and supply that engineer inspection report to me, now I'm able to actually go to the house with knowledge saying, okay, these are the insufficiencies that an engineer is looking at. These are the items that I can place a bid or an estimate on that will help you, resell the house or bring more value, bring it up to code for the bank to be able to be comfortable lending on that asset. That's where I always start. Oftentimes, when digging into those items that the engineer has pointed out as insufficient, I'm able to start finding root problems. And engineer, I can't fault them. They go in, they don't have x-ray vision yet. So they walk into the house and they look at things and they're interpreting information just by looking at, say, a crack in the sheetrock that's maybe it's above a window or a door, or maybe they're looking at a sag in the roof and now they have to crawl into the attic space. There's all these little telltale signs that they're looking at, and then they're trying to draw from their years of experience and understanding of structure in order to derive what is the problem. Then they give us their report telling us what they believe the problem is, and now it's my job to go find out the truth. And 90% of the time, they're right. If there are things that they don't catch or maybe they were a little bit off on, then I go and I show them the pictures and explain the situation, and they redraft the repair list. I take that repair list, I put an estimate together for the customer. If the customer is still in negotiation on the purchase of the building, I give it to their realtor. The realtor is able to go to the negotiation table with them. That's typically how that works. But if the home is already owned by the customer and the customer is going to the bank for money for repairs to increase the value of the home or live in it, sell it, whatever the case might be, I give them that estimate. And they get to pick and choose what it is that we actually do. My company, what we do is we base our estimate on the item. So I'm not going to look at a list of 30 items and give you one number. I'm going to look at a list of 30 items and I'm going to give you an estimate per item, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 different options per item, and you kind of get to go through a la carte style and pick and choose what works best for you, and then take that to the lender. The lender approves or disapproves. If they approve, then they're in contact with me, and we're able to work out deposits and invoicing and progress billing and things like that. And it should be, if it's done right by a reputable contractor. Do
you know any of those?
I'll get back to you. Yeah. It should be kind of a turnkey thing for the customer. My company what we do is in every situation, we have a very clear, drawn out standard operating procedure from initial contact to finish. And the customer should be dealing directly with me, and I take care of all the problems for them. I want it to be kind of a turnkey situation for them where they come to me and I take care of their headache. Right. That's what we do. And obviously decisions have to be made by the owner, by the customer, but we're taking all of the problems to them and giving them solutions at the same time, trying to take the headache out of their hand, deal directly with the bank, let the bank know what the costs are going to be, if there are any increases in estimated costs and why, and making sure that all of those problems are all coordinated for the bank and for the customer. So that's typically the flow of how these things happen for us. There's always a caveat. No two situations are ever the same. But we're here really to take away the burden off of the customer's shoulders and help them through that process, much the same way as you do when you're selling a home for a customer and they don't know all the legalities and things like that. Your job is to take the burden off of their shoulders and point them in the best direction based on the best of your knowledge. And that's what we're here to do as well. It's just the other side of the transaction.
That's what's always so tough about home sales and even renovations that the person already owns the property, but backing it to where you're doing a sale, there is so many things that convene at once about the property and that you're seeing from your side and stuff. And so a lot of people, I'm glad you talked about the frustration. The frustration is a very real possibility with the smoothest systems. And I think you and I can both agree. My whole goal is to get a buyer to the end with no problems. However, it's seldom that way unless it's the perfect house with no issues, which is just not that common here.
No.
So I've changed how we kind of come at it. I just kind of forewarn people like, hey, stuff does go wrong. We've been here before, or I've been here before, and I'm going to give you guidance on here's our options. And all you have to do is decide on options. Like it kind of simplifies everything down. You're not like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. And I'm just talking on the real estate side, but I'm sure it's very similar for you where, hey, we ran into this thing. We can either do this or do this. Which would you prefer to do? It takes stress off of me because for one, I'm not the one making the decision. But you as a consumer, it's like, hey, you've always got options, almost always. Unless sewage is pumping into your house, and then there's you just get that thing done. But I did want to talk about the engineer's report. I kind of skimmed over that. First, go ahead.
Can I back up for just 1 second? One of the things that I would tell any prospective buyers, just piggybacking on our last topic there, is I always tell my customers, whether it's a remodel or a new home purchase that they're working on, as far as my industry and the construction side of things are concerned, I always encourage everybody to figure for a 20 to 30% variable. Up or down. It could go either way. But where I feel like a lot of customers come in and they purchase a home and they want to remodel it and they've got all these grandiose ideas, which I aim to give to them. But it costs money, and we don't live in, say, California or, any of these places with more stable soil and standard building practices. We have a plethora of building practices based on our climate. What that means, and I say all that to say this, bids don't ever come in completely 100% on target. Estimates don't ever come in exactly as a $100,000 estimate rarely ever comes out to exactly $100,000. So adding in that managing that expectation and saying, look, there is a 20 to 30% variable at times. We're going to manage that the best that we can.
Yeah, and there's two ways to look at that too, because and this was not a contractor here locally. This was down south. They prided themselves on hitting their marks, and I'm going to bring this back. Don't worry. Don't be sweating. When we give you a bid, that's what it's going to be. And of course, the climate and everything was different down there. And when I talked to them how they did that, they just instituted that extra into their bids. So instead of sometimes they came out where they wanted to be, sometimes they came out a little better than they needed to be. You know what I'm saying? So they're like, hey, when we give you a bid, that was their big selling point is like, this is all you're going to pay. It's like our bid is going to be probably 20 to 30% higher than everybody else though. And it's, so there's always that balancing point. So, and again, I guess if somebody wants to do it that way, that's fine. But when you're going in, and this does relate to the engineer's report. So I'm glad you brought that up. So we say engineer's report. A lot of people are like, oh, geez, we're going to pay thousands of dollars to get an engineer out there. Most other areas that I've ever heard of, Fairbanks is the only area where we don't generally use home inspectors for purchasing homes. Everywhere else, it's a home inspector, which is generally licensed by the state. They have some kind of contracting experience. Usually they go before a board, blah, 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 and become a home inspector. Even in Anchorage, it's that way, is my understanding. Here in Fairbanks, because of the condition, we talked about permafrost a lot. We didn't even talk about it gets 50 below here sometimes, guys. Like there's a lot of other factors that also affect our homes. With moisture buildup there. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So it became, this is the story I heard. This is before I was, probably even old enough to sell real estate. Is you would get a home inspector out there. The lender would then come back and say, hey, we need an engineer to look at this thing. So you get a home inspector and then you get an engineer out there. And the engineers at the time said, hey, why don't you just take us out there first, kind of thing. Sorry, home inspectors. And so I think we do have a much, we'll say different. I don't want to say home inspectors are bad or anything like that, but engineers that we have up here are looking at things very differently, and they have a much higher education that they're going through to obviously become engineers. So very, very common. And when you say to pull an engineer report, the lender is going to require that if you're purchasing a new house. If you're doing your own renovation, I still recommend it. It's like $600-700, and it's so nice to have a checklist. You feel so satisfied when it's all checked off. You're like, oh, I did everything, and you may find more or whatever. But piggytailing off of that. So it is generally required. You get that inspection. If you're buying a new one, the lender, you send that to the lender on a renovation loan only. We do not send them on regular house deals, but on a renovation loan, the lender looks at it and they say items 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. These need to be fixed to have a safe sanitary home. Forewarning, it's almost always every single item that's going to need to be, that what they're putting on the list is things that need to be done. And the lender very seldom misses things that says, oh, that's fine. We don't care about that. They usually want it all done. These inspections are non-destructive, just like you were saying. So it's not that you have a bad engineer, although I'm sure they're out there. Most cases, it's like, to know the answer, we need to tear the wall open, and we're not allowed to do that in most cases. So you're looking at a small window, and then Garrett comes in and opens the window up and like, oh, now we see what's going on. We thought it was this thing. We were right on some of it, and we were wrong on the rest. It wasn't a leak from the roof. There's a weird plumbing line running through here that's dripping or something. So that's the deal with the engineer stuff.
And that's where that variable comes in as well.
You don't know what you don't know.
You just don't know until you open it up.
So when you're opening things up, you've already started the work. So a bidding process, again, people want like these hard numbers, which is totally understandable. Everybody wants assurities. But the thing with real estate sales, real estate renovations and stuff, there's always going to be some unknowns until you're completely in the thing or really completely done. And that's why we always say you're never closed until you're closed, because it can feel like a sure thing. And if you've not signed yet, it's not done. And I'm sure it's similar with renovation till you've, puttied the last nail hole or whatever, it's still going.
When there's usually multiple solutions, there's good, better, and best, typically speaking. We're in there to improve. We're going to fix the problem, but typically speaking, there's a couple of different options per problem. So it's not always worst case scenario, but sometimes we get in there and we find really good news too. We just did a renovation. Actually, one of your previous guests here, shout out to Erica Moeller.
Wonderful.
Our company did her remodel on her roaming root cellar, her new location there.
Man, that is a good sales pitch for you. It's so cool in there.
It's such a fun, it was absolutely a phenomenal project. It was a fun project for us because there was some creative freedom there, and Erica's an awesome person anyway, but we kept opening up walls and finding best case scenario. And we never find that.
Give an example of that.
There was actually some beams that needed to be corrected that were support beams for the roof. It's a large flat roof, and finding that the original contractor actually built it right, it made it really easy for us to correct. So what was a really big issue of this support beam that needed to be, was rolling and needed to be corrected, and the city got involved, and it just was going to be a massive problem, turned out to almost be a non-issue.
This is like when you pull the carpet back and it's hardwood in every single renovation show of all time.
Right? Yeah.
You think they go in there and put hardwood in before the show? I can't believe it.
How do they get this lucky all the time? They, there are those situations too where we're expecting something terrible and it turns out to be okay, you know, so
yeah, I think
it can go both ways.
We always, and it's human nature to like, let's say comments on social media stuff. You'll have 100 nice comments, but the one not nice one is the one you really fixate and remember. Yeah. So it does go that way frequently. I'm at home inspections and people always call our engineers deal killers, and various things. But there's a lot of times we go in there and we're like, hey, we're pleasantly surprised. This was, there's half the list that we were expecting.
It's not all doom and gloom.
Things are way better than we thought they were going to be. And again, it does go the other way too.
Yeah, it does.
That's what inspections are for. So now I want to talk about timeline because that's a big one. So we already kind of covered the possible frustrations that come with it. And again, just to kind of put a pin in that one, I really think unknowns are what frustrate most people. And if we knew everything, it wouldn't be a process. So there's no way to really guarantee that, but you can smooth out the unknowns and just relaxing is the biggest part. And knowing, especially when you have a professional at hand, it's that calm knowing of like if I was your agent and I'm like, never seen this before on everything that happens. It's not really that comforting, but it's like, we've been here 100 times. Yes. You know, and that's true with every job field. Everyone thinks their problems are, particular to them, and they're so shocked. And I'm like, hey, this is maybe the 10th time I've talked about this week, and they're like, oh, I thought I was the only one dealing with it. You know, so that's the frustration side. Now let's talk about timeline, which could be frustrating for people. Again, I'll start with the loan side. If you're using a loan, and I know this affects you because that happens a lot, is they're going to give you timelines. And again, it depends on the bank. It depends on the loan program. Some want things done as quick as 6 months. A lot of times it seems like a year is generally where we get to, where it's like, hey, we want all these repairs to be done for a year. And then before handing it over to you, you do have the ability to extend these things, usually with fees involved, because things are what they are. So on the timeline side, what are you seeing when people are doing their renovations? I don't know, just your general thoughts on getting things done in a timely manner.
As far as just make sure we're on the same page, as far as like a remodel is concerned, or as far as like the actual lender for a purchase is concerned.
Let's say from closing. So we've closed this thing. So we've gone through. It's closed. We have the account set up, ready to start giving you money, and now the timeline, the clock has started ticking. And again, we're just kind of talking the lender side because in my field, most people are going to be getting a loan for these kind of things.
I understand.
So on you, and I'm sure you've started the discussion beforehand, but how are you lining up timelines and making sure things hit?
So again, I always take the initiative to build that relationship with the lender themselves, especially if you're dealing with a local bank. Some of the banks here are Alaskan owned. They love investing into our community, and they're a lot easier to work with as far as these types of loans are concerned. What I do is I always build the relationship with the loan officer and let them know, who we are, what we are, when most of them I've dealt with before, and we already have that rapport built. But if I've not worked with them before, I build a relationship. I give them my projected timeline. This is when we can start. Here's about how long we believe it's going to take. Now, again, because it's Alaska, and our materials, are usually 4 to 6 weeks out, and that is if there's a caveat in that too. Yeah. And what if it shows up damaged? And depending on what we're doing, and now we have to reorder. Now it's another 4 to 6 weeks. So we start managing these expectations right away. It's been my experience that as we start nearing the end of a project, if we are behind on schedule, an easy, simple conversation with the lender typically helps them. They're mostly amicable. Yeah.
Silence is unnerving for anybody.
It's a killer.
But if you are not communicating with your lender throughout this process, they kind of start to thinking, have they done anything out there? And we've given them $60,000 so far. Has something happened? You know what I mean? 100%. Yeah. So all these ideas start running through their head, where you can assuage that very easy, like you're saying, by saying, "Hey, we're 99% there, but we're waiting on a window that's 16 weeks out for whatever reason."
100%. Yeah. No communication is worse than communicating negative information. Yeah. So most of us feel like I can deal with problems. I just need to know what they are, and the lender feels the same way. In most cases, they're pretty amicable with timelines that are running behind for legitimate reasons. I have come into a couple of situations where they weren't going to be amicable. And for the most part, that's never the issue. But, we just have to massage each situation according to whatever they're feeling at the time.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
No, it does.
Oh, okay.
I've got a follow-up question.
Okay.
So we're going to dispel a myth here. So if you could get a project and be done the very next day, would you do that if it was possible? Or would you defer? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what everybody wants, everybody.
Yeah.
Just so you know, there's no contractor out there that wants things to go on longer than they need to.
No.
And it's the same with real estate agents where I've been blamed before for timelines getting long or whatever. It's like, listen, I get paid when we close. When we put this under contract, I want to be closed 5 minutes later. Like if that was an option, I'd take that option.
Right.
So just so we're all on the same page, like we're all pushing towards the same things. But in Alaska in particular, again, just bringing back, and you said it perfectly, managing expectations, such a huge, in every field you're in. We have, I think, very specific issues that a lot of other parts of the country are not dealing with. Shipping stuff here is hard.
Yeah.
What, 10, 15 years ago, like there was no Amazon, there was no 2-day shipping. Like I think we kind of forget. It's like you couldn't get anything here. I remember being a kid in Alaska and nobody shipped here ever, so whatever was here was here. That was kind of it. So we're still far away from everybody else. That's still the issue. So you spoke about getting the materials. Again, the weather, we have really with no snow on the ground. Is it even 6 months? I don't know. Maybe it is, from when it last melts off.
May to October.
Yeah. So 5 months ish. Or no, that's only 4 or 5 months where we have no snow, and you can do stuff through the winter, but you can educate me on this. I'm assuming the work changes a little when there's snow on the ground and things are frozen. So, anyways, I just wanted to point that out, that timelines, I wanted to talk about them and to talk about the reasons they can get extended. They can be shortened again too, depending on weather. Like you could have some really nice days or whatever. Snow doesn't come for an extra month. Like either way it can go. So last I wanted to talk about, when you complete the project, everything's hunky dory. I don't think there's too much to add on to that beyond, I guess your spiel. Like when I finish a closing, I don't want that to be the last conversation I have with my clients generally, because it is an ongoing thing. Do you have, I guess, anything you'd like to add to that when you close up?
Yeah. So when we're finished with the project, depending on the nature of the project, we always walk our customer through. If they are able to go through the process with us and I can show them everything that we did, I always do that. We photo document everything as well, so that if they're unable to, maybe it's in an attic space, maybe it's in a crawl space, there's, if the customer is not able to access the work site or the work area, we photo document so they can see. I give a 1-year labor warranty on all of my work. Obviously, material warranties come into play as well. But as far as our work is concerned, my company prides itself in fixing our mistakes. We're all human and we make them, but they don't have to define who we are. So what we find is that just being honest and fixing our mistakes, admitting we made them, and ends up earning us more trust and more work. What we do with our projects, everybody gets a 1-year warranty on their labor, regardless of how big or how small the project is. And we fix our mistakes if there is a problem. If there is not a problem, we still contact at 11 months and say, hey, you got a month left on your warranty. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
And, that gives you an opportunity to actually go look and double check. Sometimes it's an issue where it is in a crawl space. You haven't gone and looked because it's in the crawl space, right? Gives you an opportunity to go check it out and make sure that you are still satisfied. And
that's huge. That's huge. So, I do something similar. I don't have like warranties, of course, for what I do, but I always give a call around a month after someone's moved into the house, just to be like, hey, is everything, have you settled in?
How's it look?
And you wouldn't believe how many times they're like, I can't believe I'm hearing from you a month later. You already got your check. Are you, you got a problem? I'm like, no, I'm just checking. But yeah, that's great. So you're even, I don't know, I think a lot of people are crossing their fingers for that 1-year mark to pass, but for you to go out and to, almost invite, more work for yourself to, keep your standard up is wonderful to hear.
We're a small town and reputation is key. And I've worked really hard for a reputation, and I've worked really hard to fix the mistakes that we have made and just own them. Yeah. we're not perfect either, but we aim to be.
Yeah,
and fixing our mistakes is really what defines us. So that's where our integrity lies.
Yep. And so you pulled up the photos and the reports, and this is something important for homeowners. So now you're through this project. It's been whatever. We'll say it was from the time you put in. Well, let's say from the time you called your agent till you were done with the renovations. If you had we'll say a full year of renovations, you could be in 14, 15 months on a thing. So that was a very long process. You're at the end here. Please keep a folder of everything, basically, but especially the repair items, because as much as people want to think they're in their forever home, chances are you're going to sell that home at some point. And those are, for me, selling something. It can be the same house, and people don't understand this. Like, well, whatever repairs were done or whatever fixes or upgrades, they're done. They're in the house. But if you don't list those out, they can often be overlooked. And a lot of things are because they're behind walls and they're not being seen anyways. Yeah. But if you can show, it is very helpful for sales. When I have the buyer and we have what's called associated documents, if there's extra documents, and they have a very good list, even not pictures or anything, a good list of all renovations and the costs beside them. Oh man, making offers is so much easier. And they're like, oh, you want this much price? It's like, we had one. I was like, man, this seems like a pretty high price condo. And he says, here, let me send you, the listing agent says, let me send you this. It was like I think they sold it for $265. He sent me, I don't know what she bought it for. Like, we'll say $180. Okay. Anyways, she sent me bills, $190,000 in renovation.
Whoa.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, well, it was done well. It was a great renovation job. Wow. But yeah, and she knew she was upside down, but it was so much easier with my client. We didn't end up going under contract on that one. But it was so much easier to be like, hey, I know you were thinking this was high priced, just slide that thing across and be like, just so you know, they put $190,000 into this. That's
amazing.
Wow. And so it's super helpful. Hopefully you don't overpay for, and I'm not saying that she overpaid. I shouldn't say that. I think she was kind of aware. Again, she thought it was her forever home, and people are willing to spend more, which is fine. It's fine to do.
Circumstances change in life.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So anyways, I just want to make a note of keeping that. And then we'll quickly talk about selling renovated and unrenovated homes. And you join in whenever, of course. I feel like I spoke a lot on this one, but selling a home that has been renovated is super easy. If you've done it correctly, there's not too much to be done. You just market it correctly, get photos, kind of the standard things. The only things I would keep in mind, and this is way back at step 1, which again, hopefully your realtor and your contractor is helping you at this point. If you're looking to make a sale from it, the emotional stuff you like has to go away.
Yes.
If you want the pool and you're willing to overspend for the pool, like we keep bringing up, do so. As long as you realize you're not getting your money back, that's fine. But if you're looking for a flip, your mind has to change. It has to be, hey, we are doing the items that's going to make this great for the client or the next buyer. You're not trying to sleaze anybody. I'm not saying that. But we're looking for the items that are going to have the biggest ROI, return on investment. And a big one I always talk about with people, by the way, side note, is really painting. If you paint your house and your house is like totally fine, paint is one of the cheapest, especially if you do it yourself. It's like one of the cheapest ways to increase, unless you do a bad job. But anyway, so that's pretty easy there. Now let's talk about selling the unrenovated home. So you, for whatever reason, have to sell a home. It happens. We'll not go into all the reasons. That is in rough condition. I just wanted to make a note of anything is possible, but you have to realize price is the factor. There's marketing and stuff that goes on, but price is the factor. And you're obviously going to have to lower your price a ton because of all the things we just spoke about. I don't know if everyone saw, like, it could be a 15-month, 16-month cycle of work for the next buyer. They're have to be very careful on how much they're spending, because they have renovation costs, they have everything. So you can imagine why someone that needs to get a loan, or even if they're doing it cash, is giving you such a reduced price. So be understanding of that. It's like they have a ton of work ahead of them that for whatever reason you were unwilling or unable to do. So you're passing the buck along, and that's going to cost you money. So as long as you're understanding of that. And then the only other item I wanted to talk about was just the general state of market right now, and maybe you can talk to this more. I have felt a shift in my homes that sell that need renovation, my flipper homes, we'll call them, that people are coming in and they're with the sole intention of flipping. It seems to me that the buyer market for that has been much reduced. I don't know if you would agree with that, where I remember a switch 2023. I listed a house that was livable was not financeable. It was livable though, but it had a lot of work. And I was like, this is not a bad, this is like the quintessential, if somebody wanted to, they could live here and fix it up. It was like right on that edge. I was like, this is going to be cool. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. I want to say we listed it for around 120. I would think I was expecting about 110-ish for it. And we're getting offers for like 60. And I was really surprised. And it's not that I was bad at my job. It's like there was just like this weird shift that happened. And I think it's been about 2 years ago maybe now.
The investors came in and
we're
looking at opportunities for cash purchase.
Right. And there's always been investors, but what they're willing to spend seemed to drop off a cliff almost. Yeah. Have you noticed any of that, or is that just me?
I haven't dealt a lot with that in the last couple of years. So since COVID, I feel like a lot of that has gone away.
Yes.
And I don't, I'm not an economist. I don't understand why, but from my perspective, it is because things got really hard for a lot of people financially during that COVID period. So what is the causation? I don't really know, but it does seem to have slowed down on my end as well.
Yeah.
So I will say, to circle back to that person who's trying to sell that unrenovated home, from my point of view and the things that I deal with, I get those. That is not the situation that you want to go knocking out walls to create open floor plans, right? You're trying to sell a home, putting the least amount of money and time into it. It's unrenovated. You would have renovated it prior if you wanted, that greater return on your investment. In that situation where you're selling an unrenovated home, just keep in mind that an engineer is going to walk in there, if they do, and they're going to look for deficiencies, primarily for things that don't work and things that don't meet code. So if you got that window that doesn't open, you've got those vent fans that don't work, you've got those little things, those light fixtures that are broken or don't work. Those are the things that are just instant, easy, things for an engineer to write up or a home inspector. Those are also real simple, easy things for the home owner to fix and replace. For some, not everybody, but my company is one that will also come in and take care of all those little issues for you. And if we know that you're getting ready to sell the home, we are experienced enough to know what's worth fixing, what isn't. So we're not going to come in and knock down those walls and, remodel the mother-in-law apartment. Yeah, not at all. But we will come in, we'll search that house for all of the deficiencies, things that aren't going to work, things that are going to be called out by an engineer, so that even though a buyer is walking in, looking at the place, thinking of all the renovations they want to do, they're not buying a home that doesn't work. And it makes the sale a lot more appealing to a buyer who's buying an unrenovated home.
Yep. And one more side note, I keep adding side notes. I'm sure we'll have to go back and forth. But is and again, I've talked about the financeability. If you go from a house that cannot be conventionally financed to one that can be conventionally financed, it depends so much on the house, but just almost rule of thumb, add $100,000 to $150,000 to that purchase price. Like, it's a big jump. And sometimes it's minor things where you're doing a few items that you were really close and you just needed to push it up and over. And it's like, that's when it's the easiest. Sometimes it's not as simple of a decision to do. But yeah, and we should point out that you unrenovated sellers, there is options for you to get that renovated. So you may think there's no option. So again, I think a real estate agent is usually the greatest contact. But a contractor, I think they'd be neck and neck there, or even both of them at the same time, where it's like, hey, these are the things that I want to accomplish. Get some expert opinions, because not that we're better than anybody else, but we've seen way more. So we'll talk about renovation as well. So people, whatever, in their lifetime, average person maybe buys and sells, we'll say 10 homes, but most people don't even do that many. I'll do that in a few months. And like, just to give you a scope of like how much we just touch so many more deals. And same with renovation. Maybe you renovated 10 homes in your lifetime. You'll do that in a few months, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So just know that we're not like saying, hey, we're better than you or any of that.
Correct.
However, we have a wider breadth of knowledge and experience. So there may be an option that you've just not thought about. And nothing feels better, just like when you're saying when you come in and fix people, nothing feels better than when I talk to someone and like, well, have you thought of this? And they're like, oh, that totally changes everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. And so just from one conversation.
Agreed.
Okay. What do we got? You got time?
Yeah, I'm at your.
Now we're gonna.
I'm at your disposal right now.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We're past all that. That was the boring stuff that maybe you cared about, but now we're going to talk about some jiu-jitsu, which is what I care about.
In comes the passion conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I did want closer. I wanted to back up again now and almost have that origin story. So what got you into? We'll just say martial arts. In general, where did that start?
It's actually kind of a funny story. It's a long story. I'm going to shorten it.
We got time.
When I was 15 years old, I'd mentioned before we lived off grid. This is in Montana. We were 25, 30 miles. I
totally didn't hear you say that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I want to talk more about off grid. That's cool.
That's
though.
okay. Yeah. We were a long ways out there. Let's say that, out in the mountains of western Montana, and. I'd always had a interest in the martial arts. You know, I was like every other kid who, watched American Ninja and thought that I could really do those things, right? Yeah. So there was this passion for it and this desire that, not real sure where it came from, but it was deeply ingrained in me. And given the circumstances, I wasn't allowed to train in the martial arts. It was kind of off limits to me. So
was it like a religious thing?
It was a religious thing. So, which I'm no longer involved in that side of that life. But, at that time, I was kind of forbidden to do this. So, fast forward, I'm 15 years old. I found a pastor in town who was teaching an American style of karate, who, was teaching this form of martial arts in order to draw in kids from the underprivileged neighborhood around him, around his church. He was teaching in his gym, and he was teaching for $1 a class donation recommendation. So I, being a 15-year-old with infinite knowledge and wisdom, rode my bike the 25, 30 miles into town for tutoring and scholastic purposes.
That was your conditioning work.
And I would stop off at that and take a class on my way home. And I got away with it for a few months.
I was going to say, it's pretty hilarious that your rebellion was doing a martial arts, which I think a lot of parents would want their kids to do.
They would probably really like, right? Yeah. I recall wheeling my bike out of that church one day and seeing my dad in the parking lot waiting for me. So I got in a lot of trouble. But that's kind of how it started. They were able to see that it wasn't a negative thing in my life, and that it was actually building me up, and all of the positive aspects of it started to be seen by them through a different perspective.
And not to age yourself, but how long ago was that?
That was I was 15, so that was 25 years ago.
I'm getting to be an old man.
Yeah, I'm 40 years old.
Just want to bring that up. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're going to be too old to come to the podcast next year, so this will be your last visit. No.
That was that was a while ago. So I continued on and had to practice my negotiating skills with my parents, and so ended up getting my black belt in that style. I think it took me about 3.5, 4 years, and got my black belt. Ended up going on to teach that art for, I guess I was part of it for a total of 13 years. During that period of time, I moved to, that was 1997. I moved to Fairbanks in 2004. Again, as spoken before, for aviation. Ended up starting a karate school, got into boxing, things like that. Just before I had moved to Fairbanks, I started jiu-jitsu, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. This was 2003, October of 2003. There was a little school in my hometown in Montana that was teaching this groundbreaking art that nobody had heard of, that was, all over the Ultimate Fighting Championship at the time, and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And so I decided that it was hardcore, and I needed to know this.
So did you, beyond just wanting to be one cool dude, was that kind of the motivating factor for the original karate class, or was there like anything beyond that? Like you just thought it was a really cool thing to do?
It's funny. Back at the time, it was just a passion, and I didn't really understand the reasons why. As you fast forward, and I've gained more understanding of myself, I start to understand that there was things that I felt like I had no control of in my life that were leading me in that direction, trying to gain control. There were traumatic things that had taken place in my childhood that kind of led me that direction. I didn't even understand it at the time. So it took years to actually understand that about myself and come to grips with it so that I could, deal with my own.
This was a juncture. This is something you could excel at and control.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And, awesome. And it's because of the martial arts that I feel like I'm the person I am today, and actually like the person I am today, based on all of these things that it's shown me in my life that I otherwise wouldn't have learned that way. So, 2003, I started jiu-jitsu. I ended up breaking my neck in training, and it was a freak accident. Not something I've ever seen happen before or after. And
you could have got millions. Didn't you see
that?
Got a lot. You could have done a lot better for yourself. That instructor's going down.
No, I'm kidding. We ended up about a year and a half later. I'm living here in Fairbanks, and started going to the only jiu-jitsu program in town, and stuck with that for quite a few years, and ultimately ended up starting my own school, Revolution Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is actually founded in 2013. So it's been here operating in Fairbanks for 11 years now. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and in this American style of karate. And over the years, I just continued to train and learn, and was never really satisfied with what I knew and wanted to know more, and just never said no to opportunities. I've been real blessed and privileged, I feel, to be able to have been ranked in 9 different arts, traveled the world coaching, teaching, learning, competing, kind of really, when it comes to the martial arts, there's not a lot that I haven't done at this point, including, competition and MMA and fighting professionally. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. So I wanted to talk about, you did talk about your belts, and I want your opinion on the belting system, because I think there's a lot of, I don't know, everyone's got an opinion on it, whether they're in it or not, but you got your black belt in karate in 3.5 years. You got your black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in 20 some odd years. So it's definitely a different system, but I just want your thoughts, I guess.
Yeah. So, and, all things included, with all the time off for broken necks, I've had surgeries and things like that kind of gave me a couple of years off here and there. It's about 16 years to black belt. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a totally different art. It's not based on a criteria of do A, B, and C proficiently, or, here's a kata that you have to learn, or things like that. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is an all-encompassing thing. It's not just about technique. It's not just about your attendance. It's not just about, your self-defense. There's lifestyle involved. Are you a good training partner? Are you consistent? What's your attitude? You out to hurt everybody? Because that's not going to get you promoted either. That Billy Badass who shows up and just wants to take on the world is usually the guy who's actually promoted slower. And because of the attitude and maturity that goes along with the knowledge and skill that is necessary to promote. I
find, and this is maybe contrary to what a lot of people would think, that at least, and I've not done the other martial arts, so I'll just speak about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I've only been doing it for about 2 years, so this is my perspective, is the humbling aspect of it is really nice. So you do have someone, again, maybe they are really good for their belt level or whatever it is. They come in and they just have this natural affinity, and we'll say they're a white belt, and they're like, man, they really learn quick and stuff. You're still going to get choked out by a blue belt or a purple belt or, whatever. And it's extra demoralizing when, they're kind of talking to you about their day, which does happen. I think a lot of people find that funny. Like, how's the kids? Like, as you're cranking on them.
Choked out.
Good. So it is, I don't know, it's a ton of things. And again, I've not been in it as long. And I also have, I don't know, it just, after about 6 months, I was like, gosh, I wish I could do this every day, all day long. There's like, and not everyone does it click that way. The art of it itself is obviously a lot of fun, but everything that comes with it, it's really hard to put it all into perspective for people. Like when you're, I'm thinking, oh, I missed this thing, but really my skill wasn't there or whatever. Really, I wasn't trying. And then I'm thinking, why wasn't I trying? And you're making these emotional, connections. Was I not trying because I knew if I lost, I could tell myself I wasn't trying? You know what I'm saying? Like all the things you can go through.
Sure.
That a lot of people don't realize. So do you feel the jiu-jitsu or the martial art itself has had a bigger impact, or what it has done outside of the gym for you?
There has been nothing in my life that has had a greater impact on me personally, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally than Brazilian Jiu Jitsu has.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Having, again, ranked in 9 arts, having fought and competed in many different styles of martial arts as well as mixed martial arts, nothing has taught me greater control of myself and my opponent as Brazilian Jiu Jitsu has. There's a lot of studies about Jiu Jitsu and trying to understand some of these things that you're describing. There's the community aspect of it. Some of us who did grow up in very religious homes, we don't have that community anymore if we've left that lifestyle. That community is gone, but it can be gained elsewhere. Jiu-jitsu offers a community of people from all walks of life that wouldn't normally come together. In my school, I have doctors, I have law enforcement, I have drug dealers, I have former inmates, I have mechanics, I have every walk of life is there. And we're all there for one purpose. And nobody really cares about what's going on outside. It's about getting better together. Yeah. Becoming better human beings and helping each other be that.
I think there's a multitude of reasons as well, but I've noticed, I think you're forced to become closer to the people because the physical contact, there's something to it. Oh, yeah. You're literally like, you're hugging each other for, a long time. So there's that, which a lot of people do find uncomfortable at the beginning, but you kind of get used to it and realize what it is. And there's the other side, again, is the humbling, embarrassing bit where you're trying to learn a new move and you do something and you just look like a doofus or whatever. Yeah. But nobody, we all look like doofuses, maybe not in that moment, but throughout. So I think having, and probably a third item is it's just hard to do. So you have these 3 things that come into play where you're like, again, if you were going, I don't know, just doing whatever other activity, going to the bar with somebody, you don't get the closeness in that community that you do when you're choking them out, which is funny to say.
So University of Florida, one of the universities in Florida. I shouldn't quote this without the actual paperwork.
I tell all my guests, whatever we say here is the absolute truth and none can be denied.
It cannot be contested.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of research on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in specific about the psychology of it and what you're trying to describe now. There's just something different. And it's something that can't be experienced unless you try it.
Are you saying you think it's different than other martial arts as well?
I do. I do. So one of the big things that always sticks out in my mind is all of the research that's been done on why is Jiu-Jitsu, why is it such a good tool for treating things like PTSD and TBI related trauma? Why is it so good for disability rehabilitation? And the studies are actually coming back really interesting. One of the things that people don't understand is that the human body doesn't really, it's not able to differentiate between good long-term contact and bad long-term contact. So when you hug, I'm going to use it for instance. So you're married, correct? So you hug your spouse, your significant other, and you do that for 15, 20 seconds and you just feel better. And why is that? And that's because your brain starts releasing a lot of the happy chemicals and drugs that are in your brain. And your body starts to enjoy and depend on that. And you start to build a connection with that person. But the brain doesn't understand the difference between that contact and contacting somebody who's trying to maybe get mount and choke you unconscious. Your body just understands the contact. So 15 to 20 seconds of jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo contact with another human being, your brain starts to release the same chemicals.
Interesting.
So what does this mean to somebody who's maybe dealing with some trauma in their past? Maybe there's some emotional difficulties that they have. These chemicals start to release.
Yeah.
And they start to feel good about themselves. The next thing you know, not only are they building a community and they're building personal life skills and self-defense and confidence and strength and endurance, but now all of a sudden they're leaving practice after somebody just tried to strangle them unconscious for 20, 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. Happy as a clam.
Yeah.
All of their problems are gone. And I can say for myself, being a contractor and having all these projects going on and all the stress that goes on with this trade, and then going to a good training session and working myself until I can't hardly lift my arms anymore. And I'm so happy afterwards.
Yeah.
And why is that? And that's because of the psychology of these chemicals being released. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot of research. In fact, it's the research that surrounds this is why I'm founder and president of Limitless Advance, which is actually right here on my shirt here.
Yeah. What's this?
Limitless Advance is it's a veterans nonprofit. What we do is we use Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and education in the combat sports in order to give coping skills to our military members who are suffering from service-related disabilities. And that could be a plethora of different disability types. But once approved, they get sponsored for 1 year of free training. They get a gi, they get a rash guard, they get a belt. We set them up and we set up their school with the ability to train them and encourage them to form that community, start forming those habits of self-care. And then jiu-jitsu obviously being a very incredibly honest art where you can't lie about whether or not you won or not. You can't lie about what you know and what you don't know. You can't tell people you're something you're not, because the very second you get on that mat, what happens on that mat actually proves what you do and what you don't. You have to be personally honest.
Yeah, I was hearing a story about someone lying about being a black belt, and the more I got into it, I'm like, that is like got to be the stupidest thing you could ever do, or just lying about your skills, whatever it is, because it, again, like you're saying, there's no room for lies on the mat, like you are what you are at that point.
If you decide to lie, you're going to end up waking up, 20 seconds later because you're unconscious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very honest thing where people are forced to face themselves, and it's an art that forces us to address a problem head on. Right? Somebody is attempting to dominate you in a position and put you in a chokehold or maybe a joint lock or whatever the case might be. You're forced to deal with those problems head on. You can't skirt around it. You can't brush it under the rug. You have to deal with it. And that ends up encouraging people to, it actually, what it does, it teaches them a life skill. It teaches them that subconsciously, this is the way to address your problems. The problem only gets worse if we don't deal with it. And where we've found that this becomes very, what's the word I'm looking for? Beneficial, thank you. Where this becomes very beneficial in dealing with trauma and disabilities is that they not only gain the community and they gain all of the physical attributes, but then they start gaining the coping skills to deal with their disabilities. Dealing with things head on, not being afraid of the difficulties that come with facing those issues, and then knowing that they've got a support network of other like-minded people around them is a really big thing when it comes to dealing with depression and anxieties and some of these other major cognitive disabilities that we see our soldiers specifically here in Fort Wainwright dealing with. The story of Limitless Advance goes back to 2014 when Revolution Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was brought out to Fort Wainwright, and I was asked to be part of the combatives program. I became one of the coaches. We over the course of about 2.5, 3 years, we had put together a 36-man team where we were training and competing in these military combatives tournaments all over the country. Military and civilian competitions, but this was all run through the combatives program. We lost funding for that program back when President Obama sequestered many areas of the U.S. Budget. And within a year and a half of ending that program, 8 of those 36 soldiers had killed themselves.
Jesus.
8 of them.
Wow.
And that's when I started realizing there was a really major problem. And I started realizing that there was also a really major solution. I'd never seen such a group of misfits become such top-notch people and top-notch soldiers than the ones that I was dealing with within that program, who were being sent to us because there was no other fit for them. They were being articled, they were chaptered out, they were all of these problems that they were the problem soldiers that we were just given to get them off the plate, get rid of them, and they became model soldiers. After realizing that tremendous loss of life and realizing what it was that actually brought them all together, that's when the idea of Limitless Advance was conceived. And when
was that, did you say?
That would have been 2018 when we actually decided to start moving forward. Things have, obstacles have been thrown in our way over the years, but just last year, I decided enough was enough. I'd seen enough. The gentleman who was also one of the instructors, who's my inspiration for the project, was going through some of his own personal battles that I was grateful to be part of helping him with and through. And I decided it was just enough time talking about it. We needed to do something. So last year we put in the paperwork, we got our nonprofit status, and we're up and running. We've got 5 soldiers who are currently sponsored here in Fairbanks, and we're opening it up to the rest of the community.
Perfect. So how can someone get involved?
They can go to limitlessadvance.org. All of the information on there, contact information is on there. There's an application process for current or former military members who have service-related disabilities. They can apply right there on the webpage. I have a group of staff who go through and vet those military members, and then what we do is we look for affiliate schools. If there's a school out there, somebody who's involved in a school who wants to become part of the program and affiliate with us to be able to serve the military members in their community, they can also go and apply online right there on the website. And we vet them. We've got a set of criteria per school, what it takes to actually become part of the program, and then we start placing soldiers based on their location.
So something I'm sure that is very common, and you've spoke about yourself have this issue, is injuries, major injuries, especially with military members.
Yes.
I've got a buddy who used to be the co-host here, Nick, who used to do jiu-jitsu, and he's had injuries from military and different things, and I don't know that he wants to do it again, but I sure want him to do it again.
Yeah. But how do you, Nick, if you're watching?
I know, seriously, man, get off your butt. No. I think he's someone who, again, it meets a lot of people's needs, but how do you deal with injuries in, like, someone who's like, I've got a bum knee or a back or a neck, mostly neck. There's a lot of people in their back. Are they able to do this?
100% yes. I'm living testimony of that. Again, broken neck back in 2003, healed. I've moved through that. Actually, your friend, Dr. Wyman, shout out to Spalding Chiropractic. Oh, yeah. Helped me through that.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know that.
And I attribute
Was it by choking you out or his chiropractic?
I'm not sure which one is worse. No.
Which one's worse?
Yeah. He's definitely been a great part of my ability to continue. But, I've also experienced 2 spinal surgeries that were non-jiu-jitsu related, but when it comes to major injuries, the beauty of jiu-jitsu is that it's not a set criteria of things you have to do and don't have to do. It's based on your body. It's how do we use your body to the best of your ability to be able to position yourself to survive an attack from somebody who is bigger, stronger, or more capable than you physically. So it doesn't really matter what the disability is. I work with people who have physical disabilities. I work with people who have mental and emotional disabilities. It's not about the disability. It's about overcoming the disability and using that to your advantage. So using your weakness as your strength. The slogan for my school is "The obstacle becomes the way," and that is a Stoic philosophy saying of the obstacles that we've been given, are those obstacles become the hurdle. They become our mission to cross. Until we get past them, we can't move on. But we have to address those first. And if that's a physical disability, a mental disability, an emotional disability, whatever it is, that obstacle is the way. We can get through that so that we can carry on.
When you were talking about the crossover, of course, which seems to be almost the bigger factor for what you do now, from the gym to real life, and something that in every gym's different, but at least how our gym, and I think a lot of jiu-jitsu is based around really not fighting. So it seems like a combative sport, but we're looking for what is given.
Yep.
And we're turning that to our benefit. Yes. And it's very much, I would say, a very stoicism way of thinking of we're not pushing through. We're not beating our heads against walls. If you straighten your arm out in a specific position, I'll go for an arm bar. If I wanted a triangle, it doesn't really matter. It's like we're, going for that finish. And again, we're just talking jiu-jitsu, but you take that out into the real world where it's really crazy to hear you say, not crazy, but insightful, that you were using jiu-jitsu to remedy issues you didn't even know you had at the time. Only in retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, that was doing this for me and I had no idea.
Yeah.
So you're coming out into life. And so for those of you that thinks this is too hoobid-loobid, whatever, we'll just go do jiu-jitsu and you'll see the effects whether you want to or not, if you can stick with it. So in your life, being able to look at what you're saying these hardships are, and flipping them on their head where it's like, these are good things for me. This is my path to become a better person. This is my path forward. This is not a roadblock to my life anymore. It changes to when you're running a hurdle race, that you jump the hurdles. Like that's the point. That's how you continue on in the race.
Right.
It's not a, something you just turn back and say, well, I guess we're not racing today,
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's reframing that.
There's a term in psychology called your thrownness. And essentially what that is, that's the situation in your life you were thrown into that you can't help. You can't help what family you were born into. You can't help what country you were born into. There's these things that you're thrown into that you can't help. And a lot of us have physical and other disabilities that we were thrown into, things that we can't help. And jiu-jitsu gives us the opportunity to use that. Right. And actually turn that into something positive. And I'm not saying all thrownness is a bad thing, but, for a lot of us, it can feel negative.
Yeah.
Being able to use my physical ailments as a benefit seems completely counterintuitive. Jiu-jitsu has taught me how to do that.
Yeah.
It's taught me how to live with what I've been given and use it to my advantage. And I think that a lot of other people can learn the same thing. I'm still learning. I'm not perfect, obviously, but don't tell anybody, especially my girlfriend. But
just a few listeners, dozens. No, but you have.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you've got these, and even. Yeah, I like what you're saying because everything becomes a strength. Yes. So I'm, and both of us are bigger, taller guys, which in most combat sports, that is a benefit. And it's kind of unavoidable. Like I can, if somebody's the same skill level as me and they weigh less, like chances are I'm going to have that little bit of benefit. However, that's not the only benefit with jiu-jitsu, at least, in life. You can look at the same way where someone who is, let's say, smaller can fit through little holes differently. Yeah. Maybe they're more flexible and they'll sling a leg around. Where you're like, oh my God, where'd that come from?
Right.
and different things. So knowing, I wrestle with a guy, he's gained weight now, but Josh, who we were talking about, who has always been the smaller guy and he still is, but I was just telling you, like, he's so much better than a lot of heavyweights because he has to compensate, we'll say, and treat things differently.
Yeah.
But if he tried to beat me by smashing me, it would be a poor way of doing things. It's a futile attempt. Exactly. It's like, hey, I've got 60 pounds on you. You know, he's like, it's probably not a good idea. But if he clambers to my back, which he does all the time, and I can't reach him, you know, it's like one of those scenes, you know, like me wearing a backpack. He's not that small. I'm acting like he's a normal size human, just so everyone knows. But yeah, it's knowing, again, and it comes back the obstacles away. Same thing is knowing that, hey, these things that you are seeing as weaknesses, these things in your life that you're seeing as obstacles, how can you change that in your mind? Because that's all it takes to become, hey, this is the biggest benefit of my life. This hurdle, how can this become the biggest benefit of my life? And it's so evident when you look at great people of history that I almost feel bad for myself because I've had such an easy life. The great people of history have had terrible lives, and you feel bad for them, but they would not be who they were without those items. Right. You know, so I was like, I need to institute a little more hardship in my life.
But on the other side of that coin, so you mentioned these great people, right? You look at Genghis Khan, or, you know, all of these negative figures that you could think of, right? Who changed the world because of hardship and the way that they dealt with it. But the opposite side of that is also true, where one person and their actions can actually make a great positive impact as well, right? So just because it's there's negative things that have happened, or maybe physical disabilities, things like that, doesn't mean that you can't use that to change someone else's life for the positive, who may go on to change the world, right? It's that 1 degree of directional change that can really alter the life of somebody else in a really positive way. And
so I think a lot of people view it, and maybe you'll disagree with me, that you have, we'll say good people doing good things or whatever. And it's like when they have any kind of fight, like force field fight, you know, and like these two forces meet, you have bad and good, and they're, you know, and I've really just recently kind of, do you like that? Show my wife's laughing in the corner. There's just a lot to be said. So
you mentioned the editing process.
So how I've started to look at it is you have, good people that are doing good things. You have these bad people that are doing objectively bad things, Genghis Khan and stuff, like you've heard of all the atrocities and different things. But in the end, the bad things that this guy did will ultimately be for the good. Which is, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but you have, I don't know, what is it, like 60% of the population that has Genghis Khan genetics? It's like
some crazy number like that.
Exactly. It's like, did he do horrible things? I'm not saying he didn't. Do I want someone to do that again? No, I'm not saying that.
Right.
However, now we have whatever, half of our population, like huge percent of our population due to this one fellow. So can you say that his negatives outweighed? You know, it's hard to say, but I think it ultimately, as you look at the scan of history, hundreds and thousands of years as it goes along, even the negative stuff, all the force fields fighting each other, it turns back and starts all going the same way.
Ultimately, it comes back to, what did you do with it? What did you do with the information? What did you do with the circumstance? It's our mistakes. Our mistakes don't define us. It's what we do with them that defines us, right? So somebody makes a mistake, okay, I'm not condoning that, right? Not condoning it. There's major mistakes that are made, but what happens with it after that? And some of us, and what I find in a lot of people who come to me for jiu-jitsu training, have endured some really difficult things in life. And what sets them apart from those who stew in it is that they want to make a right decision. They don't want that to end them or define them, right? So they come into class, they start learning jiu-jitsu, they're trying to become better at something, anything, and they've heard good things about this. But that's what defines them, is the fact that they didn't let that stop them. Whatever that was, right? They continued to try and grow through it, past it, and ultimately those really negative things can then be used as a positive.
I think so. It's hard to say, because I don't want it to feel like we're saying is we're belittling your stuff.
Not at all.
That wasn't bad at all.
No,
you know,
not at all.
You had this horrible upbringing as a child. Good. Like nobody wants to hear that. We're not saying that. However, you can choose to stew in it, or you can choose to make yourself better. So I think that's the important bit. It's like, we're not wishing bad things upon people.
100%.
But you know, David Goggins, I don't know if you ever, I mean, you look at his life and it really, really sucked. Would he be the same David Goggins if he had a happy childhood? I don't know. So and I think if you asked him, I think he's happy for it, which is kind of crazy to say, but he is who he is, and he's positively affecting a lot of people that don't have to live that life.
Right.
You know, I'm reading his book and I'm getting nuggets of whatever that are helping me. And it's like, I didn't have I had a really easy life, you know, almost to my detriment. I've got it good, folks. But I did want to talk about the MMA. So you fought, like what would people say, like cage fighting style. Did you do that professionally, or was that like a hobby for you? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so for about 8.5 years, I fought. I didn't go very far with it. I wasn't on the national scene, making big names. I was mostly here in the Northwest. Excuse me, pardon me. Okay. There's mostly here in the Northwest, just gained a lot of experience that way. I still obviously ran my company and had to work. I was not making enough money to survive off of that. I don't think most people can, but
well, I've never done, I thought I would. So when I was 17, so I said I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about 2 years, but back when I was 17, I did it for probably a year. And much different style. Still did it with Shannon and Phil, actually.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so kind of full circle there. But I was like, I'm going to be a cage fighter, you know. And luckily I was 17, so you had to be 18 to really get into the cage at that time. Maybe, I don't know. I've been seeing a lot younger kids these days. But and never did like a full out fight. However, we would do hard sparring and stuff. And I would wake up the next day feeling, whether win or lose, I felt like I was pretty good at that time. I was like, you know, I felt like I won, whatever. And looking back, I was terrible. But I would wake up feeling like
not on you, but on me.
a trash pile. So I cannot imagine you going to do a fight. Let's say wherever you fly down somewhere, you go do a fight, win or lose. You know, unless you just beat them up in 30 seconds. But let's say take one of your losses. I assume you lost, or were you undefeated? Okay. Yeah. You take one of your losses.
In glorious fashion.
And then you have to go back, and you literally got beat up, and you've got to go do contracting work again. Like, what was was that... It had to be hard. I don't know. Was it just like, it was what it was. But
imagine being the customer when a guy shows up with a black eye and a broken nose. And
that's what I'm saying.
Like, what happened to you?
Again, even if you win, you look terrible. You see the post-fight interviews with the winner, and they're like, did that guy win? He's all like deformed.
I can say my experience in MMA, the reason why I quit MMA is because I had to realize, again, going back to the honest art, right? I had to realize that I did not have what it takes to make it great. So I was not going to destroy my body and my brain doing something that hardcore just for the sheer pleasure of it.
Can you go halfway in MMA? I think that's not. Yeah.
I think it's a bad idea. You can. I shouldn't say you can't. You can. I think it's a terrible idea.
I agree.
You are playing, I think Joe Rogan says it best, you're playing a high stakes game that if you lose, it is very highly detrimental to your health, right? So if you're dabbling in something like MMA, you're playing a game of dire consequences that your life could be changed forever. I've seen fights. I referee most of the MMA here in Alaska, MMA events, I should say. There's a show that's just popped up down in the valley that I'm not a part of, but
they didn't call you first.
No,
the kingpin of MMA in Alaska.
Yeah, they should have known.
Yeah, their knees are going to get broken.
I have gotten a referee. I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds of MMA fights, and I've seen people's lives actually changed because they were dabbling in it. I think if it's something that you're going to do, you need to dedicate yourself for several years of training before ever considering going into a cage, into a situation where there are very few rules. You're not going you're not going into a contest against somebody like you would in a bar fight who doesn't know anything and might be inebriated. You're going into a contest against somebody who's just as clean and sober as you are, who's been training just as hard or harder than you have, who is skilled. They're skilled in the art of destroying a human body. And that's something to take into consideration if you're thinking about dabbling. I would not recommend it.
Yeah, I agree. You have this, like you're saying, and there's people that, okay, let's back up. Every man, at least, thinks they're the greatest fighter from the womb. I don't know why that is. You obviously are. If somebody asked me before I did any training, I'd be like, of course I'm going to win a fight.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, but when you have 100% of people thinking they're going to win a fight, 50% of them is wrong, obviously. Right. So, and that's a one-on-one fight, which is not always the case out in the real world.
Right.
But there is also, and this is just a reality, of the situation, I think you're going to accrue a few injuries from doing jiu-jitsu in particular.
Yes.
There's no way people call it the gentle sport and stuff. And I guess you could call it that. We're not like hitting each other in the head on purpose, even great training partners. And the number one reason I think, and again, just doing this for 2 years, I'm a blue belt now, is when I was a white belt. And even still is I would hurt myself because I didn't know the limits of, we'll say, the human body at certain things. I didn't know that if somebody was pushing my head down, I shouldn't try to force my head back up with my neck until the next day when my neck was so sore. I was like, wow. So now I don't do that anymore. You know, so you have all these items. So like you're saying, somebody wants to fight, even if they've trained for 6 months, they don't know how to properly lose, we'll say, or properly protect themselves. And again, even we talk about tapping out, which if you don't know what that is, it's pretty obvious now, is someone gets you in a choke or they're going to break your arm or something. You tap out saying, hey, you've got it. We're done. And you save yourself that. A lot of people don't know what that limit is, even still. The passing out seems to be less of a concern for people, but it's still pretty an intense thing. If you pass out, some people don't wake up. Like it's kind of a, arm break, of course, sucks, especially if you're going to go home and do contracting, you know, and again, you don't know, you're like, I'm totally willing to tap out. And they snap that sucker off. It's like, I thought I had a few more inches in me. It's like, nope. Whoops. you didn't have the flexibility or whatever it was. So, and again, this is someone who's not done MMA, but I've done now just only 2 just competitions just with jiu-jitsu where nobody's going to punch me, at least on purpose. Here's the trick,
never
everybody.
Say never.
You just say sorry after you get done.
Well, if they don't forgive you, they're the asshole.
Exactly. It's like, did you elbow on purpose? Yeah, but you didn't really want to.
I said sorry.
I said sorry. Oops.
Which, by the way, I have to say, and for those who don't know you and your jiu-jitsu, I've gotten to watch your jiu-jitsu game over the last couple of years. We've trained together. We've obviously been friends here for a few years, and the difference between your first competition and your second competition is night and day, even though it was just 1 year. And the hard work that you've clearly put in speaks volumes. But congratulations on being first place winner in the Alaska State Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament here. Just, what was that, a week ago? Week and a half ago. So congratulations. That's
Thank you.
A huge accomplishment, and especially coming from where you were even a year ago.
So I think you won't be surprised by this, but while in a year, I think my skills did increase greatly.
Tremendously.
The mental, I would have lost, if I had the same mental fortitude or whatever you want to call it, if I had the same way of thinking last year, if I had that this year with my same skills, I still think I would have lost. So that's kind of a lot of people don't realize. And I was unprepared for my first competition, which is why I lost handily 2 rounds back to back to people. And again, if these people are watching, they're probably great practitioners. But at the time, I felt like I was better than them, and I still lost, you know? And was I right? No, because they beat me. So whatever, maybe I'm making excuses for myself. But speaking of hardships and stuff, that was really surprisingly a big blow to me. Probably just my ego, which could always use another hit. But yeah, being able to come back and prove some things out is always good. But
you showed what a martial artist does. What a martial artist does, they take that loss. They learn from it, and then they go back to the drawing board, and you end up learning more from your loss than you do from your win.
100%.
And that ends up ultimately becoming an overall win.
Yeah.
You know, what you learned from that, you couldn't have learned from 6 months of training. And that showed in this last tournament when you went in with a healthier mindset, better prepared, and showed grace and win as well. That's so kudos to you. It was a night and day difference.
I did pants my opponents after I beat them. So. I always pulled their pants around their ankles and just add on the shame. I really had to try.
Pull the jersey over the head.
I'm someone when I play games or anything, I'm pretty competitive and I get amped up. I think it's half the fun, but I also realize for the losing people that's not. So I was like really trying to just be like, you got to not like overdo it here if you do win. And I was a little bit tired, so that helped. But my original point was in a competition, a physical competition where, again, we're not trying to beat each other's heads off. However, we are actively trying to break each other's bones, and we're trying to choke each other out, whichever comes easier, So there is still some confrontation happening there. And I know there's a lot of jokes online with jiu-jitsu matches. Some, butt scooting and stuff is frowned upon. But regardless, knowing that, like you're saying, I personally have moved past the MMA. I don't think it's worth the risk for me. And again, I especially at my age, I don't feel like I'm going to be a competitive player in that field anymore. As much as it's enticing, we were talking about this. The striking stuff is, I don't know why I love jiu-jitsu is probably my number one, but the second is, and I always call it jiu-jitsu like a chess match with your body. Like you're just looking for these holes. You're trying to overcome their play with your own play, whatever. Yeah. And striking is that same way. Yeah. And it feels, but there's so much more open space, which if you guys are combat sports people, it's really easy to block a punch if I'm holding on to you. Like, I don't want to say easy. It's much simpler, I would say. Yeah. Than to when you have this void between you guys, this blank space where you don't know where stuff's coming at you at full speed, and you know you can't choke things up on there. So I am a little miffed on how to do that without getting my head hit. Do you have a good idea?
Bob and weave. Bob and weave.
I know. I'd love to do it, but
if I had all the answers, it wouldn't have taken me 25 years to get this far. And still feel like I know nothing about it.
I know. That's the thing. I hope it never goes away. But because I just feel like, and I just don't know that I'll ever be. I know that I won't be the most elite of elite, because the most elite of the elite are probably going to be younger than me, and B, they're doing it all day, every day long. So it's, being aware of that. However, I have this unending need, and I think this is the nice thing about jiu-jitsu and probably a lot of martial arts, is I do want to improve always. And I don't think there's ever a point where you're just like, I don't guess there's anything left for me to improve. And maybe you could speak to that more.
No. Yeah. The deeper I go into this, the more I realize I don't know. And again, that's one of the beauties of it, is there's this, the personal aspect of this is that it's so honest. You can't lie to yourself either. And just the very moment I start thinking, I got this, I don't have it anymore. Yep. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. Yeah. And I think it was Elio Gracie, known as, one of the greatest of the greats. He was one of the founding members of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He and his brothers, Elio Gracie being one of the more notable of the founding members. After 70 plus years of Jiu Jitsu, on his deathbed, he was asked what his greatest regret was, and he says, "I only wish I had learned more about jiu-jitsu." I mean, I'm sure he said other things about his family and his wife is like, but she's like, "Wait a minute,
you got something to add there?"
Yeah, I know, right? What about me?
All his grandkids. No. Yeah, definitely his life's work.
70 plus years, he still felt like he knew nothing about it. And what that tells me is that it's just a bottomless pit of information. So for those of us who are curious, and who have that need to learn and explore, it's a great way of doing that. And especially here in Fairbanks, where half the year it is well below zero, and it's too cold to really go out and enjoy outdoor sports. There's skiing and things like that you can go do, snow machining. I'm not saying there aren't things to do, but the large majority of our physical activity is indoors. And this is a very healthy, mentally and physically healthy way of satisfying that curiosity and that need to learn, that need to explore and challenge myself, while doing something constructive, and also being a constructive member of our society, being able to coach and help people, being able to help our military, being able to help through nonprofit. It's for me, it has been a plus. Yeah. I've not found a negative about it yet.
So we'll finish this off. I could go forever, but Sam, we'll finish this off with someone who wants to start or is doing their first training session or whatever. What advice would you give them to ensure that we'll just say make it to blue belt? We won't even worry about black belt. Let's say, what's the best advice? Like, hey, you're going to be here if you do these things, and you're going to make it to the next belt level.
So this is my advice for a lot of things in life, but with jiu-jitsu, if you feel like it's your first class and you feel like you're a fish out of water, you're exactly where you belong. And if you ever feel like you're not, then you're training with the wrong people. You should always chase that feeling, because that's where you will learn. We have to fail to learn. And the more often we fail, the more that we will learn. So always chase that feeling is my number one thing. My second bit of advice is the only way to win a race is to put one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. You'll never find the finish line otherwise. Mm-hmm. Having the golf cart come and pick you up and cross the finish line does not get you a medal, mm-hmm. right? So my advice is to those who are thinking about training, when you feel like a fish out of water, expect that for the rest of your career. That's a good thing. Mm-hmm. If you're already training and you feel like it's difficult, you've plateaued, you're bored, whatever it might be, one foot in front of the other is the only way to win that race. Just keep showing up. Yeah. And the only difference between a white belt and a black belt is that a black belt has just never quit. Mm-hmm. And they failed more often. That's the only reason they know more.
And that's why I wanted to bring
up on that.
Yeah. The belt levels are always interesting because a lot of, I will say outsiders believe that a black belt solely means you're the baddest mother effer out there and stuff. And it certainly can mean that. But it's not always the case. And a lot of people don't even know in jiu-jitsu, there's one belt above, which is the coral belt, which is that 9th degree black belt?
Or something you get coral about 6 and then it goes to red after that.
Okay. I'm sorry. So you go up into this red, did I say red black belt? The red belt. Yeah. And, everyone's asking, like I saw somebody, it must've been a comment or something, which shows the lack of understanding. It's like, why don't you ever see these red belts doing like these super matches? It's because they're 90 years old. It takes that long to get. It's not only about timing, but it's also not only skill. Because if you only did skill, you'd have to take people's belts away from them at some point. Yeah. Because you get older and you lose something. Yeah. That happens. Maybe it's just your physicality. Sometimes it is the mental side of things. Like, all right, you're going to go to this guy who's been practicing for 60 years and say, you're not really up to snuff for a black belt any longer. It's like, hey man. Yeah. So there's a lot more that encompasses it, but, and to be honest, just get better. Like the belts don't really need to mean that much either. Like I think everyone agrees on that. Yeah, it's a nice way. Like when you do competitions, there's a lot of reasons to do it. Where you're kind of like trying to put people against similar skills and things like that. So there's a lot of reasons for it. But again, like you and your own personal journey will derive the most from just getting better and not being too concerned about what level you're at.
Agreed. It should be about the journey.
Yeah.
And those schools that are chasing the belts and, glorify the belt colors and things like that. I always wonder about them. What is the focus? If you're chasing a belt, you're chasing a status. Yeah. You're not chasing getting better and you're not chasing the journey of it. So, if you are training and you're like, man, it's been 4 years and I haven't gotten another belt, or man, it's, I know blue belts who've been blue belts for 10, 12 years and they just don't care about the next belt, which would be purple. Yeah. They don't care. They're there for the journey of it. It's a personal journey. They're there to learn, and that's what I encourage people to do, and not really care about the belt system.
Yeah, and I'll add my last two. If you're coming in, just as you said, you are going to suck at it. Like, again, I think a lot of men in particular assume you're just going to be great at things, which is a great mindset to have. Sure. But you're going to get, most times, you're going to get kind of worked over, at least your first one, unless you're just awesome at life. I don't know. Yeah. And the physical phenom, which they're out there. But generally speaking, you're going to get worked over. And then the other thing that a lot of people bring up, because we see martial arts and we think self-defense and fighting, and there is 100% of like that. It is applicable to fighting. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to say it's not. There probably are some martial arts that really shouldn't be used in any capacity, but jiu-jitsu is applicable to fighting, especially if you get on the ground and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Not every move and position is. However, there's a lot that are for sport. But beyond all of that, you are not good enough at the thing to make the decision if it's applicable. Mm-hmm. And that's what, down the road, you can make that decision. I'm not good enough. And I realize that myself, where it's like, I want to learn as much as I can without judgment of what it is. Mm-hmm. Because I'll have people, even in your class, I was rolling with a guy and he's like, this just doesn't work right. And I'm like, hey, maybe we're just not doing it right. you know what I mean? Right. So and again, things will work better or worse for different body types. There's all this kind of stuff that goes into it. A lot of variables. But the real root cause, I think what it is you start to rationalize reasons to not do it. Mm-hmm. And you start to belittle jiu-jitsu, which again, I'm not trying to be like only jiu-jitsu fan or whatever it is, but give yourself the time to realize how much you don't know. Mm-hmm. And especially at that belt level, you've got someone who's sitting here that has been doing it for 16 years and who says, I still don't have it figured out. it's a little pretentious to think that maybe you figured it out in your first class. It's like, well, I know what's a better way to do it, you know?
Sure.
So just knowing and just kind of get rid of the ego, know it's fun, know you're going to have a cool community. And, you know, at the end of it all, if you go for whatever, 2-3 years and you're like, well, that was a waste of time. It's like, well, it probably wasn't a waste of time in all ways, you know?
Yeah,
so
agreed.
But,
if there's anyone out there listening who would like to try Revolution Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, we're in the Shoppers Forum Mall right next to Planet Fitness.
Perfect.
First class is always free, and
yeah,
come on down, give it a shot.
Yeah, yep. You do have to compete in your jock strap on the first class. I hope that doesn't bother anybody. No, I'm joking. No, it's super good. Rights. Yeah, no, we didn't talk about the culture. There's all different kind of cultures. I'm not going to point to anybody in particular, but there used to be, we'll say 10 to 20 years ago, especially when UFC was like, when people thought MMA, they thought UFC, which is still the case. Mm-hmm. And these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms were rough. Yeah. And there is still that, and there's a place for that for competitive MMA fighters and stuff. I've obviously been to Revolution quite a bit. It is not that. Yeah. You can, if you want, depending on your partner. But if you're looking for somewhere you're not going to die and feel like you got beat up every single time, I don't know. It's still physically hard. I don't want to say it's like a walk in the park.
You can make it as hard as you want.
You can make it as hard as you want, but you don't have to be, again, you don't have to be afraid that someone's out there just for blood, you know? Right. Yeah. And I felt like that with everybody I've rolled with at your gym, which is great because when I first come, you know, it's a weird feeling when you've trained at another gym and you go to a different gym. You're like you're trying to figure out everyone's balance point. You know, maybe you, like me, again, I'm a big guy. I'm always combating, like, not trying to kill people where they don't want to wrestle with me anymore. Right. Funny story about that. I was going against, I don't know how much you weighed. Everyone at your gym's 160 pounds, it seems. But no, going against 160 pounds. No, joking. By the way, we didn't talk about this. New location at the Forum Mall there, and Shoppers Forum Mall. Right?
Yes.
Okay. And you've like what, quadrupled in size in the last.
More than that.
Yeah. Grown a ton. And not because he wasn't good before, but because the space is, I think you just have the space there to carry that capacity, which is like awesome. So there is quite a variety of sizes, skill levels. It's really great for different training partners. But anyways, I was rolling with someone who is much lighter than me. At the time, I was probably about 240. He's 160, so there's an 80-pound weight difference. I'm in a dominant top position, and Garrett looks over and is like, hey, you should probably lower your hip in, and because I'm kind of holding my weight off. And I was like, I don't want to crush him. And I remember you saying, no quarter. I was like, all right, fine. And it was like, you know when you squeeze a toothpaste bottle out? Yep. That was what it was for that guy. But it was good. Again, we laughed about it after. But it's also good for him to know, again, in a self-defense situation, there's going to be people that are my weight, you know, right. And he really knows for sure that he does not want to end up on bottom. Right. And he wants to do some different tactics from there. So
there's a balance between being a good partner and feeding unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
And in that particular situation, I would not have encouraged you to do that with a new female white belt. But,
right.
I would have, with that particular person, I remember that match, was getting ready for a international competition.
Oh, wow.
And needed to know.
Yeah.
He needed to know.
See, that's good to know. That is that balance point. Even at my own gym where there's fewer of us in the class, I constantly vacillate. Sometimes I'll get back and I'll just beat myself up and be like, man, I put it on too hard today. And I wasn't being nice or whatever. So there's always this balancing point, but what really it comes down to is communication. So I tell all my partners, like, if you tapping out is the number one. Like, people just need to know, like, even if I'm crushing you and you just don't like how I'm doing it, just tap out and talk to me or whatever, vice versa. Because I would hate for someone to be mad at me afterwards, being like, that guy was being a jerk to me. And I'm just like, I'm just doing what we're fighting. So it's a weird, you know what I'm saying? Right. We're trying to be friendly, but again, we're trying to like choke each other out.
Well, I don't put up with that negative, Billy Badass attitude in my school anyway. That's not a teachable attitude to have, and it's also not good for the rest of the culture that I promote. So in our school. So if you were to come in and you say you had no experience or you had 20 years of experience, you can find any level of difficulty in training that you ask for. Yeah. Because it's all there, but you're not going to find somebody who's just going to be a jerk.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I was, again, talking to another buddy. I'm always trying to get people doing more jiu-jitsu. It's my life calling now. But, and he's talking about bringing his son. His son, again, is 150 pounds. I don't know. And he's like, are we rolling together? He's like, I don't want my son rolling with you. And I was like, you want your son rolling with me because it's really not. I think the more skilled, the better. Like whenever you're, whenever I've rolled with like brown black belts, I feel safe. You know, they're about to choke me out, but I feel safe. Like I'm not worried that I'm going to land weird it's a very different feeling. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is nice, you know, but you can, and it's kind of an ongoing joke. And again, everyone starts as white belts. So I'm not trying to talk them down, but you can get a crazy white belt where you're like, I feel like I'm in legit danger because they don't really know what's happening yet.
They don't know the limitations of their own body yet.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. Should we end this one?
Yeah. Okay. I guess if we have to.
All right. Well, thank you so
very
much.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
For sure.
All right.